Okay, let's get started. Tonight, we're gonna talk about food labeling. However, before we get into the different aspects of food labeling, which by the way, we will focus on food labeling as per the regulations. So we are focusing on what are the regulations requiring us in terms of food labeling. There are many other graphics and information that you can put on your labels, but we're going to focus on whatever regulated information should be there. However, if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask them. Before we dip into food labeling, we need to understand a little bit about packaging. So we're gonna start talking about packaging and what are the different roles of packaging in order to better understand what the package is and what is the role of food labeling within food packaging. So let's see what else I need to tell you right now. There are gonna be questions for sure. If you have, please don't be shy, ask them. That's part of the reason why I'm here for. So the way we put together this presentation is that I'm gonna talk a little bit about, I'm gonna give you some information and then we'll stop, we'll pause for questions. We'll address your questions at that point and then we continue on. If you have anything, again, as Pamela said, just jot it down in the Q&A section and we'll address them either as they come along or whenever we stop, okay? So without further ado, let's get started. What is packaging? Well, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, packaging is the presentation of something or someone to the public in a way that it is designed to be attractive or appealing. So when we talk about packaging, we also need to mention the material that it is used to make the package. So that is also part of the definition there. It says material used to enclose or contain something. And if you have ever been to the movies, as I'm sure we all have, you're probably familiar with that picture there of a overflown popcorn bucket. And right there, you have the first thing about packaging. You know, your product is supposed to be inside the package. So if you have, as I'm sure you have, gone to the movies and purchased your popcorn at the stand, you know that the first thing that happens as they put the popcorn down in front of you is that some popcorn falls down. So at that point, you have to ask yourself, you know, is this container adequate? You know, shouldn't it be a little bit larger so the popcorn doesn't fall? But of course, we all know that if we are given a larger bucket, then we will ask to overflow it again. So, you know, it's a never-ending story. So just put away the popcorn, or on the other hand, go grab some popcorn because we are going to be here a couple of hours. So if you get hungry, you have something to munch on. So let's move on. You know, keep that in mind. What is packaging? We're going to present something, and that something is going to have several functions, several reasons in order to that. I'm sorry, my English translation is not that good today, so it's going to get better. Don't worry. We are presenting some information in the package. Some of that information is what the regulation asks for, and some of that information is based on the market, and some of that information is based on the enterprise specifications. So again, we're gonna focus on the labeling requirements of the regulation. Okay, say we have that. Again, the main function of the packaging is to contain the product. So there are many different packages that you can use to put your product in. So you can use plastic bags or plastic containers or cardboard boxes. However, remember that the main intent of the packaging is to keep the product inside. So I remember a few years ago when I started preaching about proper packaging here in Puerto Rico. I used to go to a supermarket and find the locally produced lettuce inside a bag that is open on one side. So it's it contains the product as long as you keep the bag in the proper position. Because if you grab the bag, you don't grab it with the hole to the upside, then the lettuce was going to fall to the floor. So remember that the main function of the packaging is to keep the product inside. So you can use different materials, as you see here, either plastic or cardboard or paper. Some other packages are made of glass or metal. So you can use different materials, but it is important for the product to be contained inside, okay? So once you find a product, a package that keeps your product inside, then you need to protect it. You need to preserve it. And there are many, many different factors that can actually affect your product. You spend many hours pampering your little babies in your farm or in your factory, and then you send them outside where there are all these different factors looking for a chance to spoil them or to damage them. And we need to protect them. We need to make sure that these little babies are ready to face that mean world out there. And as you can see here, there are different factors starting with improper handling. You go to the supermarket and you look at the produce section, you stand there and see what the people are doing, looking at the different fruits and vegetables and selecting what they want. And what you can see, and probably you have done this, we all have done this. We go there, grab whatever fruit or vegetable looks appealing, and start pressing it or looking for damages and stuff. And that has two problems actually. One is that as we press it, then we are inducing damage into the fruit or vegetable. We grab some fall, they fall either on top of each other or to the floor in the worst case, and then they get the bruises. Some bruises you don't see at that moment, but tomorrow or a few hours after the impact, you will start seeing the discolorations and the softening of tissues and stuff. And the other thing, as we have learned in this COVID pandemic era, is that we need to wash our hands because our hands transport or carry many diseases, including the COVID virus. So, but even before COVID, that was always the message, keep your hands clean because that's mishandling or handling produce or any food with your hands dirty is going to spread diseases, microbes, etc. So handling is something that actually can affect your product as well as all those different factors that you see there. Oxygen, it affects lipids, pigments, flavors. So if they are exposed to oxygen, some of those components change over time. The same thing as with sunlight, specifically ultraviolet light will affect colors and pigments and flavors. Same with water. For example, if you have bread and you leave it outside without proper packaging, the bread will get hard. And the reason why it gets hard is because it loses moisture. However, if you have like soda crackers, it's the opposite thing. Initially they are crispy, and if they gain moisture, they get soggy and soft. So either too much moisture or lack of moisture will affect the quality of your products. And then, there are pests, flies and cockroaches and rodents and every kind of insects and pests. So we have to make sure that our products are properly protected. And the only way to properly protect your product, once you work hard to produce a high quality and a product with good food safety, is to put a good packaging there. And that's the second function, that's the second role of your package. First is to contain, and second is to protect and preserve it. The third one is inform and sale, and that's the one we're going to be focusing today. So right now, I'm just going to tell you that inform has to do with providing consumers with all those information data that regulatory agencies require us to do. We're going to leave it as that for now, and later we're going to come back and talk about all the different requirements on labeling. The other portion of that role, which is inform and sale, is the sales part. And the sales part is more focused on what is the message that my industry wants to convey to the consumer about this product. So the selection of colors, the selection of graphics in the package, sometimes the shape of the package, they are going to be sending messages to the consumer. And scientific data actually says that when you put something in the market, like for example in the supermarket, and then consumers are passing by with their cards, selecting the different foods, the package has like 7 seconds, just 7 seconds to convey the message that you want to convey. And it has to tell you what is the product, what is the benefit of that product, and what makes that product better than the competition. And you have 7 seconds to do that. So it's very important to actually select the right colors, select the right graphics. So you are sending a very powerful message to consumers as they pass by walking through the supermarket. So that's the part on sales. And again, we have regulations from the different agencies, and that we're gonna, again, as I mentioned before, we're gonna focus on, we're gonna see the different details on the information that we have to actually include in the labels in a few minutes. Now, I have here the UPC code. The UPC code is not a load code, okay? It's not a load code. The UPC code is for marketing purposes. That's actually there in order to facilitate the sales transaction at the supermarket. It's not a requirement of the law. It's actually a requirement of the market. If your product doesn't have a UPC code, some businesses will actually not accept your product and you will not be able to sell it. So it's actually a market requirement. Okay, the fourth function or the role of the product is transport. And transport has to do with making sure that I can send the product that I put together, that I pack with all my love, and send it out to the consumer the most efficient way possible. And when we talk about efficiency, what we mean is that we want to send the greatest amount of product at the least possible cost, okay? So that's what efficiency of transportation is about. And in order to do that, we have to understand what standards are already in place in the transport industry. Like for example, the pallet size, these pallets here, these wooden pallets, either wooden or plastic, whatever you use, they are standard sizes. So you have to make sure that you can prepare your pallet to include the greatest amount of product possible. Okay, so that's like a Tetris game, you know. And if you select your product, your package, individual package, to be half an inch greater, 1 centimeter greater on one side, that is actually going to affect how many individual units you can actually place in the pallet. So, you know, it becomes a little bit crazy in order for you to actually be able to um, comply with the different requirements of the transport business and actually make sure that you are being efficient in the process. How can I get the label? We'll get to that, Carmen. We'll get to how do you get your label for your product. We'll get to that. Give me just a few more minutes. We'll get there. So again, the transport, you have to make sure to know the standards on the transport industries and design your package so you actually take advantage of moving the greatest amount of product at the least possible cost. Okay. Now, we already mentioned the 4 roles of the package. So now let's select some package depending on the product. Okay, so the first consideration is whether the product that I'm gonna be shipping or send it to the market is actually fresh product or is a processed product. And different products have different characteristics. Like for example, if we are talking about fresh products, we need to consider like shelf life or storage temperature and that kind of things. If it is a processed product, then is it a process that requires refrigeration or is it shelf stable? Is it packaged on a plastic container or a metal container? Because the rigidity of the different containers varies. And of course, you know, if you need to stack them, then you need to consider the weight of the stack. Otherwise, if you don't consider that, then the pile will eventually smash the products on the lower shelf, right? So fresh or processed is one of the considerations. The storage temperature, and again, you can actually select your material, the material that you want. You can use paper, cardboard, metal containers, glass, plastics, and depending on your product, is the different characteristics, even for the same material. So you need to ensure, like for example, if you have a product that goes to the freezer, then whatever water is there, and as it freezes, is going to expand. So your packaging material needs to provide some space, say for that expansion. Otherwise, it's going to crack open, and then you will lose the hermeticity of your container. Another consideration, as I mentioned before, is shelf life. Like if it is a short shelf life product, then I do not need a package type that lasts forever. Because if the product is not gonna last forever or for 1 year, then I'm not gonna spend money on a package that is gonna last for a year or so, because the product will not be there. So I can actually, you know, select better materials more suited for the product that I'm working on. Resistant to handling and stacking. Again, for example, if we are stacking, say we're preparing our product for transportation. Usually what we do is take a corrugated cardboard box and then fill it with our product. So the thing is, if I am like, for example, here I have oranges and I'm stacking oranges, well, even though the orange is a product that has some structural rigidity by itself, as the pile gets higher, the damage on the individual fruits increases. So you can actually pile several layers of oranges, but maybe enough only to fill a box. But then if you're gonna stack something higher than one box, you need to make sure that the box itself is enough strong enough to support the stack. So that's different case if I'm, for example, instead of sending out fresh oranges, I'm sending cans, metal cans of orange juice, because the metal can is rigid. So I can actually use a cardboard box that is actually thinner, that is just enough, strong enough to keep all product together. And because the rigidity of the stack, the strength required to support the stack is actually provided by the can itself. So, that tells you that you're how much you have to invest or what kind of material you need to use for the different packages. And that is even so today that for many products, we are not even using cardboard boxes anymore. They use a plastic film because the only thing you need to do is to keep the product together. The rigidity of the pack, the can itself, provides the strength to support the stack and the any mishandling, that the impacts of handling. Cost is a big consideration, especially when you are a small business or a small farmer. Cost is a very important constraint. And in general terms, the more you need to protect your product, the more you need to invest in packaging, okay? Now, I already mentioned that you have several options in terms of material. So you need to find out the material that provides you the characteristics that you need at the lowest possible cost, okay? The other thing related to cost is environmental impact. Like, for example, right now we are at some point, the industry started moving towards plastics. And then, as you already know, plastics, then we started saying, well, we need to recycle plastic because plastic are gonna remain in the landfills like forever. So we need to do something about it. So we started recycling packages and stuff. And now the market and these new generations are actually demanding that us businesses actually provide or consider the environmental impact of the different packages that we use, because again, we are buying all kinds of products and we don't buy the product because of the nice package. We buy the product because the product itself. So once we use the product, the package is waste. So and that goes to the landfill. So newer generations are demanding for us to be more environmentally responsible, environmentally conscious, and actually have packaging materials that are more friendly. So typically, well, right now, those environmentally friendly options cost you more, but that might actually define your market opportunities, if your package is environmentally friendly or not, okay? So for some markets especially. So before you select your package, you have to consider all these different factors in order for you to have the best possible package, okay? So before I go into labeling specifications, any questions in terms of the package itself?
I know we had a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to get to it now, or do you want to address that one later, Professor?
The question was, how can I get the label for my product? We're going to talk about that in a while.
Okay, so we'll keep that one for later. I did have a question in regards to what you mentioned in environmentally conscious packaging. Any type of materials or suggestions that you would give in that regard?
Actually, that's very dependent on what the industry wants to do, the different businesses, individual businesses. Right now, there are many plastic can be recycled. Of course, paper can be recycled, or cardboard can be recycled, cans can be recycled, glass can be recycled. So again, as I mentioned before, you have options. Now, there are some options, like for example, if we can take, for example, those milk boxes, UHT milk, that kind of packaging that we usually say, well, that's a cardboard box. Well, actually, it's not totally cardboard. It's actually multiple layers of cardboard, and some have aluminum foil and many layers of plastics. And that material is very hard to recycle because it's so expensive to actually disassemble all those layers that it's less expensive to actually make a new one. But again, there are many plastics that are recycled that will only that would also depend on whether in the place where you live they actually have recycling places. Because if you have all these materials that can be recycled, but there is no recycling agency where you live, then what's the point? You're still filling the landfill. Yes, in Puerto Rico, it is difficult to get packages for eggs and many other things, but those packages are out there. The other day, a couple of days back, they asked something similar to that. And the thing is, in Puerto Rico, there are a few manufacturers of packaging. There are some, but there are very few. So most probably what you need, you're not going to get in here. So you need to bring it from outside. The thing is that there are many suppliers of packaging materials, and they bring material from the different countries. So if you are looking for something that it's out there, but you cannot find it here, you can actually talk to these suppliers, and certainly one of them is going to bring it here for you. Of course, the first reaction is, no, that cannot be done. But if you push a little bit, then of course they will get for you because it's business. Okay. Any other question? No. Okay. Excellent. Let's move into the important stuff. Labeling regulations. First of all, you have to make sure that you know which is the regulatory agency that regulates your product. Okay, so there are two, in general terms, there are two agencies. There are actually three or four, but anyway. USDA deals with all products that are made out of either meat or a product that contains meat, okay? And when we say meat, it means beef, pork, lamb, goat, and equine. US doesn't process horses or any equine since 2007, but it is still in the regulation. And as recent as during Trump's administration, there was talk about starting slaughtering of horses for meat. Poultry, when we talk about poultry, again, it's chicken, turkey, duck, goose, Guinea hen, rabbits, which are like ostriches kind of birds, and pigeons. Egg products, and when we say egg products, what we mean is there are like dehydrated egg or pasteurized frozen eggs or pasteurized yolk or pasteurized whites. Those are egg products. It doesn't imply, well, I have a business of making omelets. No, that's not it. If you have a business of making omelets, that's FDA deal. So egg products and some fish, specifically the fish that is called siluriform, which are what we know as catfishes. And then agricultural products, meaning fruits and vegetables. And the portion of fruits and vegetables is actually more for marketing purposes than for food safety purposes. So we have them here because, as we will see in a short while, one of the things that we need to include is the name of the product. And USDA for agricultural products has what's called standard of identity. So you need to know where the standard is. So any other product that is not what I just mentioned falls under FDA. The only exception to that is alcoholic beverage, which are under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Firearms, Alcohol, and Tobacco, which is short for TTB, is the acronym. And they actually deal with that. But even TTB, for the products that they have, that they oversee, they rely on FDA regulations. Like, for example, if you are making beer, for example, TTB doesn't have like good manufacturing practices for alcoholic beverages. They say, well, FDA has good manufacturing practices. Make sure you comply with that. Okay, so basically we have USDA and FDA. Now, food service establishment. When we talk about food service establishment, we're talking about restaurants or food trucks, cafeterias, bakeries, and that kind of businesses where they make food for like immediate consumption. Customers go there, buy, and the expectation is that they will either eat it there or take it home for immediate consumption, for today, tonight, or so. So there are regulations for that. So the thing is, these are not under the jurisdiction of FDA, but FDA have some requirements that do apply to them. Okay, these establishments are typically under the jurisdiction of the local health department. Okay, so again, it's food for human consumption, not sold outside the establishment. So it's food that is made for people, but to eat there. So they say that the food service establishment shall provide information if making nutritional or health caring. The information that is required is this one. It says you need to provide calories, daily calorie statement, fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrate, dietary fiber, sugar, and protein. You need to provide all that information if you are making nutritional or health claim, regardless of your size. If you are making health claims or nutritional claims, you need to provide that information for menu items. Now, food chains, if you are working on a food chain and the regulation defines food chains as 20 or more establishments of the same, having more or less the same menu and stuff, you need to provide, again, all that information for all menu items. And it specifies that, for example, menu items says the regular items you have in your menu like every day. If you have a special dish for today, and that is not a regular menu item, then for that special dish that you're making today and it's not a regular menu item, you do not need to have the nutritional information. But for regular menu items, you do need to have that, okay? So that's the regulation on food establishments. Again, typically you need not to provide nutritional information, but if you are making a nutritional claim, like for example, this is a low-fat soup or whatever, then you need to make sure that you have the information on what makes it, what supports that nutritional claim or that health claim that you are making. And if you have food chains, then you have to provide the information. That's the only thing that applies to food establishment. Now, talking back about the regulation. We're gonna talk about the information that you need to include, but it's really important that you do know where the information goes. And the thing is that the regulation specifies that, okay? Actually, the regulation specify two different places. One is what's called the principal panel, the principal display panel. And again, before I continue, I should tell you, we have, you see these references in yellow, they are a reference to a regulation. So you will see in my different slides the different references to the regulation. So let me explain what that means so you can actually know where to go and get more information if you need to. You see both says CFR, some number, CFR, some number. Same thing here. CFR is short for Code of Federal Regulations. The Code of Federal Regulations is like the Encyclopedia Britannica of regulations. So every, like the encyclopedia, where you have different letters and each letter has the information about all the things that start with that particular letter. Well, the regulation is the same thing. The code is the same thing. 21, when you see 21 CFR, it means the book of the code that deals with FDA regulation. If you see 9 CFR, is the title is what the term that they use for the book that deals with USDA regulations. Now, if you happen to see 7 CFR, 7 is also USDA, but it's more for marketing purposes. So remember I mentioned to you, you need to know the identity standards, so on and so forth. Well, the identity standards, you will most probably find them for agricultural products in 7 CFR. So anyway, go back to the principal panel. What is the principal panel? It says, is the part of the label most likely to be presented to consumers under normal sales condition, excluding the top and bottom sides, the shoulders and neck of container. Okay, so in other words, the principal panel is the face of the package that you see when you go to a supermarket. It's the display that faces the consumer, okay? So most of the information needs to be in the principal panel because it's information that you need to provide to the consumer. And consumers should be able to look at the package and find the information immediately. Now it says excluding the top and bottom. Like for example, if we take this jar here, well, of course, the top is the lid and the bottom is the bottom, you know, but what's on the surface, touching the surface. So of course, we don't want to put information here because the consumer will have to grab the can and then look on the bottom to see the information. So we don't want to do that. And that's why it's excluding that. Now, it also talks about the neck and the shoulders. So the shoulder is this curved part here when it goes from the big portion of the jar to the neck, actually. This shorter portion of the jar is the neck. If you think of a ketchup bottle or a wine bottle, you can readily identify what the neck is. So we exclude that portion and the principal panel should be here, okay? It also says that if you have rectangular container, you should have the whole face as your principal panel. Like for example, this box here is rectangular container. So all this face is considered the principal display panel. If you have a cylindrical container, it's 40% of the height times the circumference. So you need to calculate all the way the distance around and multiply that by 0.4 of the total height. And what that gives you is the area that the principal panel should have, okay? That is important because one of the things that is also specified in the regulation is the size of the letters. The text that we include here, there are specifications for that. And one of such specifications is based on the principal display panel area. So we need to actually see this. Okay, so that's the principal panel. The other panel, I told you, there are 2 places where you need to include the information. One is the principal panel, and the other one is called information panel. And by definition, here are the regulations. part of the label immediately to the right of the principal panel. So in here, you see the principal panel, and then to the right, the information panel. See the principal panel, and to the right, the information panel. You see the principal panel, and to the right, the information panel. And in here, you can see the bottle and the shoulders, the neck and the shoulders, okay? When we talk about USDA calls this the 20% panel. And the reason for that is that they require for this information panel to be not wider, not greater than 20% of the circumference. So this is another specification that you need to comply there. You are a USDA regulated agency. You need to make sure you comply with all this. Now, what happens if my package doesn't comply with all that things, all those requirements? Well, I'll tell you what. When you do not comply with labeling requirements, the official term used is mislabeled, okay? Mislabeled means that the panel, that the label is not accurate. It is either incorrect or has wrong information. So it's misleading, can be misleading. So you need to make sure that you actually comply with all these requirements that we are just starting to see. This is getting better, so hang in there. Okay, so you have the information panel and you have the principal display panel. Now, in the information panel, you have to consider also this. There are some packages that even though we say, well, the information panel doesn't include the top, the reality is that there are some packages that are for products that, for example, go into a refrigerator and you stack them one on top of the other. So when you look into the refrigerator, you have what you actually see is the top of the container. So you have to put the main label there on the lid of the container. So it tells you if the principal panel is on the lid, the information panel is any adjacent side. And finally, in the information panel, we should have no intermediate material. What does that mean? Well, as we will see soon, there is some information that should be in the information panel. So when you organize the information panel, say you have requirements A, B, and C, well, there should be no additional information between A or B or B and C. So it has to be A, B, C with no intermediate material or intermediate information, okay? So that's basically what that means. And again, that's a requirement of the regulation. If you include some information, whatever that is, it can be considered as mislabeled. And mislabeled requires, most probably, will lead to a recall, okay? Okay, so we know where to place the information. The question is, what is the information that we need to place? Well, there are 6 requirements. And you might be here saying, well, this dude is really crazy because it says 7 there. Well, yes. The thing is that USDA has one additional requirement. And in my crazy mind, when I look at this additional requirement, it's actually related to the business identification. And we will get to that, we will see that. So in general terms, there are 6 requirements. For USDA, okay, yes, for USDA, there are 7. Okay. We will get into each one in a few minutes. Before we get there, I need to tell you that FDA has many different documents, that they call guidance documents. Guidance documents are documents that FDA people prepare to help us comply with the requirements of the different regulations, okay? There are many different guidance for all the different regulations they have. Well, maybe not for all of the regulations, but for the most important ones. You can actually go to their webpage. I provide the link there, right there. And you can search and you'll most probably find what you're looking for. there is one specific one on labeling. It's called like this. Actually, if you download it, it looks like this. Food labeling guide. And it says right here, it's guidance for industry. Again, what it does is it takes all the statements in the regulation and organize them so that we can actually understand what is the intent and how to comply with that, okay? So it's a very handy document. If you have questions, even after we are done, I urge you to go there, get the labeling guide, and download it and keep it safe next to your heart. Language, people, language. The regulation states that all required information should be in English. However, it does provide space for the different businesses to actually use some other languages. But they do require that if you use some other language other than English, you actually have to include both English and the other language for all the required elements. So all the information that they do require must be in English and in your favorite language. Information other than what they require, you can have in any language that you want. It doesn't have to be in English, but all required elements must be in the other language and in English. Okay. Product name, first element, first required element. It says the product name should be the name established by the regulation. Okay, the name established by the regulation. So let's get back to that. Remember, I mentioned about the standards of identity. Well, the standards of identity do exist for agricultural produce. They also exist for some processed products. Like in here, for example, you have an excerpt of the code, the FDA code. And you can see here, there is a section saying food standards in general, and it explains to you what the standards are, so on and so forth. And then it continues with the different standards for the different products. So you have milk and cream, and if you go in there, you will see UHT milk or 2% milk or the different half and half and so on and so forth. So there are many different standards for the most common items that we can find in the market. There are for sausages, patties, burgers. Of course, those are USDA standards. Even ketchup, you can find a standard for ketchup or French dressing. So you actually go to a regulation and see how the product is defined, and if the product that you are sending to the market complies with what's in the standard, then you have to use that name. Okay. Now, for sure, there are many products that do not have an identity standard either under FDA or USDA. Then what do? So FDA declared that if they do not have a standard, but the Codex Alimentarius does have a standard, then they will review that standard, and if they agree with it, they will accept it, okay? So if USDA or FDA do not have a standard, we should look under the Codex. The Codex is published by the United Nations. It's also on the internet. You can find it there. It has many, many different products. And the idea of these identity standards is to prevent fraud. You know, you do not want to be ordering bread and receive crackers, okay? If you order bread, either you have to be sure that what you get is what you are ordering, and that's why the identity standard exists. If you understand what is bread and I understand the same thing and you purchase bread from me, you will get exactly what you wanted. Okay, that's the idea. So again, there are many instances where if FDA do not have a standard, USDA does not have a standard, the Codex doesn't have a standard, so then what do? Well, if that is the case, we go with the common or usual name of the product, okay? I'm trying to think. In Trinidad, they have something called fish steak or something like that. Fish steak or no, they baked fish or something like that. It's like a two-word name. I think it's baked fish or something like that. Anyway, it's something very specific. You know, you have to go to a particular beach and they prepare this fish in a bread that has like coconut milk and stuff, and it's very nice. But most probably it doesn't have an identity standard, or nor in FDA or USDA. I don't think bacon chart. Oh, maybe I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, but it's not in the codex. But if you are selling that, then what should you call it? Bacon chart, okay? Because that's the common or usual name. Okay. What else? It says the name of the product should be in the principal panel, free from other material or graphics and parallel to the base. Okay. So when we say it's free from other materials or graphics, it means that the name should be by itself. There should be no other text crossing it or graphics that actually cross the name. It should be in the solid background where you actually look at the package and prominently you can see the name right there, very conspicuously, okay? You just see the name. And it also tells you that the typography or the text size must be, again, prominent, must be in bold, and it must be at least half the size of the largest text in the principal panel. So if you have your brand name in letters that are 2 centimeters tall, then the name of the product should be at least 1 centimeter tall, okay? And again, these are the requirements of the law. What else do we have? We should use the name imitation if what we have is a product that resembles the traditional product, but it has a lower nutritional value, okay? And when we talk about lower nutritional value, we mean less proteins, less vitamins, less minerals. We do not mean less fat, okay, or less calories. The second required element is the net quantity. The net quantity should be the weight, the measure, or the count. We talk about weight, pounds, grams, when we are talking about solids or semi-solid food. We talk about measure, ounces, cups, milliliters. When we talk about liquid and discrete unit, we're talking about things like muffins, buns, donuts, eggs, okay? So it's discrete unit. The text width should be at least 1/3 of the height. And we use for that the lowercase o as the reference. So it's and this is the element that requires you to look at the size of the principal panel. I just noticed that this information here is in Spanish, sorry about that. So it says size, the height of the text, and the panel area, okay? So if we have a label, a principal panel that is less than 5 square inches, the size, the height of the letter for net weight should be 1/16 of an inch or 1.6 millimeters, okay? And so on and so forth. If your principal panel is between 5 and 25 square inches, the size of the typography should be 1/8 of an inch, okay? And that is like that in the regulation. It's not that, you know, I'm making it up. It is like that in the regulation. I'm including here the reference. If you don't believe me, feel free to go there and check. Okay. Again, it also tells you that you should include the quantity in metric and English units, both. And it should be, the declaration of net quantity should be in the lower third of the label and parallel to the base. Okay, the lower third of the label and parallel to the base. I just have here bottled water. And again, we're talking about the lower third. Right here is the declaration of net weight. It's a 500 milliliters, and then it says 16.9 fluid ounces. We have all the information there. Okay, the third element, the safe handling instructions. Safe handling instructions, again, you can see here the reference. This one is for USDA. They do not have like that label in the regulation itself, but it has all the text written, and it tells you need to include this specific text, and next to that text you need to include a graphic of a refrigerator. It doesn't tell you it has to be this refrigerator, but it does tell you that you need to include a refrigerator, a graphic of the refrigerator there. Same thing with this graphic, tells you have to include a graphic of washing the hands on the faucet with running water. So you are free to select the graphic that you want, but the text, it is as such specified in the regulation. And actually, if you are implementing this, you can actually either, buy some labels that they already sell you, not USDA, but there are places that already, have this graphic, and they sell it to you for whatever amount of money, and then you can just place the label in your package. Or you can have the graphic artist actually put together something like this and include it in the art of your big label. Now, the safe handling instructions should be in the principal panel, and it tells you that the text should be greater than or equal to 1/16 of an inch. It also tells you that the information should be legible. Okay. Now, I've seen packages in factories, for example, where they receive the material at incoming inspection, and the material does not pass inspection, and they have to return it. And the reason why it does not pass inspection is because this letter, this text is not legible. So it's a little bit blurry, and if it is blurry, it's not legible. And again, if you decide to use it, then you are running the chance of having it being declared a mislabel, and then you have to recall it, okay? Now, I said this is for USDA. FDA does have several handling instructions. However, FDA also deals with medical devices and medicines and supplements and many different things. So they are actually the ones that have to do with food. This one for unpasteurized juice, which every day more we see less of this because there is actually a regulation requiring you to basically pasteurize your juices. And this one for shell eggs. Shell eggs fall under the FDA jurisdiction, so they have a self-handling instruction, and you probably see this one, okay? So safe handling instructions, principal panel, size of text, okay. Next one, business identification. Business identification should be in the principal panel or the information panel. This is the first time we are seeing the information panel being used. Now, for this one, it can be on either one. The previous one, they have to be in the principal display channel, display panel. You have to include the name of the manufacturer, the packer, or the distributor. If it is a packer, it should say packed by. If it is a distributor, it should say distributed by. If it is a manufacturer, it doesn't have to say anything, okay? It can just be the name of the business, and that's it. Then it says that you have to also include the domicile. And that when it talks about domicile, it's physical address, not mailing address. It's physical address. And I purposely highlighted it in yellow because if you see in this label, there's no physical address there. And the reason for that is that the regulation states that you should include the domicile unless you can actually find the address in the phone book. Now, today, less and less, we have printed phone books. However, the regulation doesn't say that it has to be on the printed phone book. So the one that you can find in the internet is good enough as long as you have the information that I can actually say, Google it, and you will get the address, the physical address of the place of business, then that's good enough. Okay, so it is a requirement, but if it is available in the phone book, then you don't need to include it. The other information that is required is city or town, state or country, and the postal code, okay? So in here we have Clifton, which is the city, New Jersey, the state, and the zip code or postal code. And then there's the question, do I need to include the website? Well, it is not required, but you can actually include it if you want to. Do I need to include the phone number? It's not a requirement of the law, but if you want to include it, you're welcome to it, okay? Can I include other information? Yes, you can include everything you want as long as you comply with the regulation requirement, okay? Good. Anything else I need to tell you here? No, we can move along. Now, the inspection mark and establishment number. Again, this is for USDA. And this is these are the references. You see here, there's only references from 9 CFR, which is USDA. There's no FDA requirement because FDA doesn't have that. And I should mention that on the establishment identification, the previous requirement we just saw, there are some jurisdictions that require specific information. For example, in Puerto Rico, the Department of Health issues what is called a sanitary license. And it's a requirement for us here in Puerto Rico to include the sanitary license number of the business whose name appears on the label. If it is the distributor, well, the sanitary license of the distributor. If it is the packer, sanitary license of the packer, or the manufacturer, as is the case. So coming back to the inspection mark, the inspection marks are these. They appear as such in the regulation. They use these marks to inspect like the carcasses or the actual meat chunks, if you want to say it that way. You use a specific ink for that, but in the package, when you're selling your product to the market, your package needs to have the inspection mark, okay? And it is as such, as it is printed in the regulation. Like if you are working with raw or processed poultry, this is the mark that you need to include. David, that there is an establishment number that USDA assigns to each and every establishment. I'm not saying business, I'm saying establishment. Like for example, say I have my own factories of processing meat, and I have one in the north, one in the south, one in the west. I have 3 different places and they have the same number, the same name. They can have the same name, however, each and every one of them have a unique number. And that is the number that I need to include there, okay? So this, again, this is for poultry. If we are working with meat, this is for meat, this is raw meat, this is processed meat, and equine, horses, or whatever. These are the marks. This is for raw, this is for processed. And as I mentioned before, we don't have that in Puerto Rico or any place in the US, legally at least. But anyway, if it is there in the regulation, it can start any moment. Questions at this point? No question.
this point, I don't see any questions open. I
Either they're getting everything, not understanding anything, or falling asleep.
I do see someone with a raised hand. So if Charlene, if you want to share any questions, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A, and we can gladly assist you with anything. But otherwise, I think we're good.
Questions.
Let's see. I think you're doing a great job of explaining, Professor.
I'm trying.
You're doing a great job.
Okay, no questions. I'll continue. Let's continue.
Right.
Let's get to the last portion, and we're going to talk about nutritional information. Yay! Okay. This is the point where I'm going to start by asking the question about where do I get my label? How do I go about my label? Okay. When many people call about where do I get my label or how do I get my label, what they actually refer to is where do I get my nutritional information or nutrition facts, okay? Now remember that the label is a lot more than just the nutritional information. If you are looking for somebody to put together a label for you, there are many different graphic artists, depending on where you live, that they actually can prepare you a label for your specific product with whatever graphics you want based on the requirements that you have, and they sit with you and understand what is your vision of the package, and they work with you and define colors, and some of these guys actually make great jobs. But if you're talking about where do I get my nutrition information, well, that's a totally different question. Nutritional information, you can go like to different universities offer this service like we do, for example, but there are also private consultants, industry consultants that actually have that capability. There are some labs that actually can help you with that also. And there are many like dietists or nutritionists that actually have the capability to actually provide you with the nutritional information. In order for you to understand that a little bit better, I need to explain to you how do we get this information. There are different ways to get the information. The first one is send the product. Let's make a bunch of chemical tests to that product so we can determine the fat content, the saturated fat content, the proteins, H's, and so on and so forth, all the different components. And if you do that, that will probably cost you, depending on where you sell it, when you send it, between $15 and $2,100. Okay, so it's not cheap. It used to be a lot cheaper, like around $600 to $800. However, when they changed the regulation, they redefined the way that we should actually perform the chemical analysis for fat. And because of that, the price increased like $1,000 or so. Yes, I will share my email at the end of the presentation is there. What was I saying? So anyway, if you when it was all that when it was around $600 that we were charging for it, a few people requested it, and there is a very reasonable reason for that, which is there is another method to do this, and the other method is what's called using a database. There are software packages that are like huge databases of nutritional information, and they have thousands of different ingredients that from literature or FDA tests, they have actually done the nutritional characterization of these ingredients, and all that information is in a database. So when you, instead of sending your product, what you send is your recipe, your formulation. So that formulation is input into the database, and the program actually grabs the information on the different products, the nutritional information on the different products, and considers the different quantities of each ingredient, and using a mathematical equations that's called what is called a mass balance, we are able to actually come up with a nutritional facts label. So using the database, which is all that to say that using the database is a lot cheaper, and both are accepted by FDA, by whoever is reviewing your labels locally, which in Puerto Rico for FDA is the Department of Health. For USDA, if you have USDA products, they actually do their own revisions. You have to submit your labels, not only the nutritional label, but the whole label to USDA, so they can actually inspect and make sure you're complying with everything. So if they actually take as good the $100 label or the $2,000 label, which one are you going to get? Of course, forget about the $2,000 label per product, and I want the $100 label with a discount, please. Okay, so we used to charge, actually we are charging, we here in Maya West charge around $100 per the label, but then you need to include the ingredients, and that's like $50 additional. If you go outside, they actually give you both things for $150. More or less, you know, some people charge more. I've seen up to $300 for providing the nutritional information. And each one, because, you know, we are competing with one another, each one has their own like little flavor, and they have, you know, I'm gonna give you this for free, or, you know, this nice also this other information. So like, for example, in here, so you can have an idea, in here, the professor that deals with that, they actually request for you to send samples of the product, and then she verifies the weight, what is the average weight, make sure it complies with what the label says, and make sure that the serving size is appropriate. So, you know, again, each one provides you with some information, but you can go to either one. This is good. And there are many farmers out there. You should know that, excuse me, for agricultural products, on this regulation, this FDA regulation, at the very end of the 9 CFR 317, they have like 2 or 3 appendices. And one of them is actually the big table of nutritional facts for the most common agricultural crops. So anyway, that's the third option you have. You can go to that table and actually get the numbers, take this design and put it together. Okay, have your graphic artist put it together. Okay, coming back to the regulation, nutritional information. The labeling regulation changes every so often. It seems like they don't have anything more to do than actually, you know, they feel creative today. Let's change something on the labeling regulation. Okay, whatever. So the most recent, most significant change happened in 2016, and it wasn't that great, but there were some changes, and you need to comply, and that's the main point. Supposedly, we were supposed to comply by January of this year, 2021. It doesn't matter what your size was, you know. Larger companies had earlier dates, and the smaller companies was January 2021. Now, because of the pandemic, well, they have eased all these requirements in terms of inspection, but they have already stated that that from 2024 on, everyone has to be compliant with the regulations on labeling regulation. Okay, so what are the changes? Well, if you already have your product in the market and you have labels from before 2016, you see that there are some differences. The main differences here are that let me just get my notes here so make sure I don't forget anything. Yes. We used to have, like, in here it only says calories. It used to have a line saying calories from fat. Now they removed that because we now understand that more important than how many calories you're eating from fat is the important thing is not really the quantity, but the quality of that fat. So they removed that statement and instead they added that you need to include the trans fat here, the trans fat declaration, because we know that trans fats are no good. And actually there are some efforts, some regulations to actually eliminate trans fat from food because we already know that that has been linked to heart disease and so on and so forth. So anyway, no trans fat. So trans fat made it to the nutritional fact declaration. There's also this statement here in the added sugars. Okay, like for example, we are making a fruit beverage. Now, if it is fruit, it already has sugar. So the question is, how much more sugar you're adding to that beverage? So you have the total carbohydrates, you have the total sugars, but then you had to declare how much added sugar you're adding here. And then the other change was down here. We used to have like vitamin A and vitamin C. They were there and they were removed and replaced by vitamin D and potassium. And the reason for that is that many years ago, when they were evaluating populations and nutritional requirements and so on, they actually identified that there was a need for vitamin C and vitamin A. But since, food change, consumer preference changes and so, now that is not the case. Our levels of vitamin C and vitamin A are good. However, we are deficient in vitamin C and vitamin D and potassium. And therefore, they took those out and added this. Okay, so those are basically the changes in terms of content. But the graphic also changed. And it is written in the law, the requirements for sizes of the text. The serving size should be type 10 text, 10 points, 10-point text. And calories should be 16 points. The nutrient information, all this information here, 8 points. And the footnotes is 6 points, okay? And then you have to include the daily value here. Okay, what else do we have here? Oh, servings. The servings are based on what is called the recommended amount customarily consumed, okay? So that's before 2016, it used to be like that. So you can go actually to a regulation and say, well, I'm eating, I don't know, muffins. Well, what is the portion that I should eat of the muffin? Well, a big muffin. Well, it's not about a big muffin or a small muffin. There's a specific amount based on grams, how many grams of muffin you should eat. And then the previous label, it would say, like, for example, in here, it says 8 servings. Well, because the serving is defined as 55 grams of whatever this product is. The regulation defines that the portion is 55 grams of whatever that product is. And that package contains 8 different servings. However, there are many small packages that have, like, I don't know, maybe anything from a little bit less than 1 portion to maybe up to 2 portions. And we actually don't look at the label and we just say, we can eat all this, that's fine. And it's only 230 calories. But we do not look that in here, there's more than 1 serving. So the new regulation states that if you have a package that contains between 67% and 200% of the RACC, the information that you should include here in the label should be for the whole package. So instead of saying, like for example, 2 servings, if it is 200% of the RACC, previously it would say 2 servings in here. Now it says, it should say, well, it's 1 serving and you have all these many calories, okay, and all this information. So there are changes in terms of the serving size that should be declared when you're talking about nutrition facts. Again, there are required versus optional nutrients. These are required now. These are the required nutrients that you have to declare. And you can actually, if you want to continue declaring vitamin C, you can actually do it. However, the regulation states that there are some specific reasons why you should or have to declare the optional nutrients. Like for example, if you are a product that you are fortifying, you are adding vitamin C, okay, so it's fortified. Well, then you have to declare the vitamin C content. And that is so because there are some nutrients that if you ingest too much of that, they can lead to toxicity. They can be toxic. They are nutrients, they are good for you, but you know, all excess are bad. So if you eat too much, then it can harm you. One of such nutrients is iron. If you do not eat iron, you get anemic. But if you eat too much iron, besides getting constipated, it actually causes toxicity on your body. Okay, what else do we have here? It says other format. Oh yes, other formats. This is called the tabular format. But there are some packages that where this label does not fit. It's small package or whatever, and there's not enough place to put the tabular form. Well, for those packages, the regulation specifies alternate ways of displaying the information. Let's see, I have some questions here. Let's see if we're gonna check here.
We do have a couple questions open.
These are related to nutrition. Let's take a minute here. If you are part of a co-op, do you have to put the co-op logo on your label? You can. There is not a requirement to include company logo. It is not a requirement. It's optional information. You can actually do it there. What it is a requirement is the name of the business. So if it is a co-op, it should be the name of the co-op. If you want to include the logo, fine. Great question. It's about full nutritional content. How is it proven that what you say on the package is just, there's something called trust. However, the underlying assumption is trust but verify, okay? We are going to trust that what you are saying is correct. However, when you submit your label for approval, you need to also submit the evidence that from whoever made you the nutritional label. It should give you the table plus a letter stating how they came out with those numbers, where the information came from. If it was a database, it should tell you, well, it was this software version, so on, so on, so. So it's trust but verify. Furthermore, both FDA and USDA have the prerogative of sampling products from the market and actually perform the chemical analysis or send them for chemical analysis to validate the information. And if it is not in compliance, then you are in deep doo-doo. Or it's a recall. So that's the more politically correct term. You are facing a recall. very informative. Is there a regional laboratory that can perform nutritional? Well, that depends on your region. But in Puerto Rico, I believe that there are some laboratories here in Puerto Rico that can actually do some of the tests. I'm not sure there's a single one that they actually perform all of them. And when we have people who request, we here in Maya West, Puerto Rico, in the university, that request to have the chemical analysis done, which is rare, but does happen. We actually send them to the US. Specifically, we use, but mostly use a laboratory called Medallions Lab. It's very good. It's been in the business for many years, and they do know what they're doing. There might be some others, but we haven't made business with them. So they might be equally good, but I'm just telling you the one I know. Okay, anything else before we continue?
I think those were all the questions that were addressed. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. Let's continue. Let's move on. That's nutritional information. Okay, that's it. And that should be, remember, it can be in the principal panel, on the information panel, but most of the time we do see them, we do find them in the information panel. Oh, I should say, well, actually, when President Obama was president, Lady Obama, Michelle, First Lady, was pushed really hard for a regulation called front of packaging labeling. That regulation actually wanted for businesses to display specific information, nutritional information, on the front portion of the principal display panel with a specific format. The idea was to fight obesity, to make sure that the nutritional information is there and people would make informed decisions and stuff. However, the scientific data show that it doesn't really matter where you put the nutritional information in the box. Those who want to see it, they will look for it, and those who actually don't care, it doesn't really matter if that is the only thing you print in the label, they are not going to look. Okay, so that killed the project, and as we all know, it's not a regulation right now. As she started pushing, several companies, big companies, started moving, but then most of them actually removed that. Can we find out the information I need on the labels for egg production? I know I did not mention that, but I do believe that the egg nutrition information it's there. It's there are not that many changes in egg nutrition. Of course, there can be because of large eggs or small eggs or whatnot. But there is a few. I do believe they have like a standard for that. Not a standard of identity, but some standard information that is available. If not, any database will give you the information. Okay, exceptions for the nutritional facts declaration. We already mentioned that restaurants do not need to declare unless they have 20 establishments or more, or they are making claims on the nutritional value or health impact of the food. If you have food that provides an insignificant nutritional value, like for example, spices, like cinnamon or products like water or coffee, that they do not have a significant nutritional value, you are exempt. You do not need to include the nutritional facts table. What they call medical foods, and medical foods are food that are prepared basically for that to be administered under the supervision of professional health personnel. That food is exempted from the nutritional fact declaration. Foods or ingredient destined for manufacturing or repacking. So if I don't know, harvesting oranges and I'm sending those oranges for manufacturing, they do not require a nutritional label. And that is a really bad example because the next example, the next item that is exempted, it's agricultural products. Fresh agricultural products and fish, fresh fish, they are exempted. They do not require nutritional labeling. Okay, and I can see some of you farmers saying, "Why didn't you start by saying that? I would save the last 2 hours of this shot." I think. Okay, let's keep focus here, people. Fresh agricultural produce does not require a nutritional facts declaration. However, one thing is saying that the regulation does not require you to label your to include the nutritional facts, and the other one is saying the market does not require, because what we are seeing more and more is that the market is pushing for fresh products to be labeled, to include nutritional facts. So there you have it. Okay, so all those are exempted food for the nutritional facts declaration. Okay, that's the exemption for. The other requirement is the declaration of ingredients. The declaration of ingredients can be in the principal panel or the information panel. However, if you read the regulation, it tells you that the declaration of ingredients should be under the nutrition facts. So it can be either or, see, you can be either in the principal panel or the information panel, but wherever you put the nutrition facts, then you have to include the declaration of ingredients right there. And again, it tells you that it should be just below the nutrition facts, unless there is not enough space, in which case you should include it next to it, immediately next to it. And the other thing it says is that it should not have, and it's coming later down, but I'm telling you right now, it should not have, remember, intermediate information. So it should be one and just the other one. One on top, the other one below. Ingredients. There are no secret ingredients, people. Remember that, no secret ingredients. All ingredients should be declared somehow. Ingredients are supposed to be declared in descending order by weight. Okay, descending order by weight, not by volume, by weight. The only exception for the declaration of descending order by weight is when you have ingredients that the weight consists of 2% or less. If it is less than 2%, you can say, well, I have these ingredients, each of them are in 2% or less, but they can be in any order, okay? So they don't have to be, okay, 2, 1.8, 1.6. You can actually put it in any or put them in any order. And the reason for that is that most of the time, those tiny little bits ingredients that we are adding are the spices or the additives that provide some specific texture. And those are the ones that actually make your product a little bit different than the competition. And the regulation recognizes that. So it gives you some allowance there to play with the order of the ingredients so that you can be protected in a sense, because otherwise it would be somewhat easy to actually figure out your recipe. So it provides you a slack there for you to misarrange them and actually, confound a little bit your competition. So the statement should say contains less than 2% of whatever, and that 2% can actually be changed as it applies by 1.5, 1, or 0.5. Okay, so you select whatever number is appropriate, and then you go. Okay. What else do we have? Compound ingredients. Compound ingredients is when you have an ingredient that has different components, and it tells you that there are two ways in which you can actually declare those compound ingredients. for explaining better, let's look at this label we have here. In here it says filling, and then it says parentheses, sweetened condensed milk, and then there's a bracket. So this sweetened condensed milk is the first ingredient in descending order by weight, the first ingredient to make the filling. And then this sweet condensed milk is made of condensed milk and sugar. So these are the ingredients of the condensed milk, and the condensed milk is the first ingredient of the filling. The other ingredients are water, key lime juice, and then it says, well, key lime juice is actually lime concentrate, lime oil, and water. And then it continues, see? And it includes the name of the ingredient and the component. That's one way of declaring this compound ingredient. The other way is actually not saying filling and just including all the different components of the filling. See, like for example, we should not include this one, but instead saying condensed milk, sugar, water, lime concentrate, lime oil. No water, not we don't mention again because we already mentioned water, and then modified cornstarch. See, we are specifying the different components that make up the ingredient that we actually use. So those are the two different ways of declaring compound ingredients. When it comes to spices and natural or artificial flavors, again, you have options there. You can actually use these generic terms. Well, I added spices, and that's it. Or you can actually say, well, I added cinnamon, or I added paprika. Okay, so that you are using the name. Or you can actually say, well, I added natural flavors, or I use artificial flavors, without any more description. The regulation allows for that on flavors. Preservatives. When you're using preservatives, you have to declare the preservative by name and state what is the functionality. So I'm adding this because it's an anti-caking agent. Okay. I'm adding whatever, baking soda for preserved freshness or whatever. Okay. So you have to include the name of the preservative and the functionality. There is also another case where you can have more than one preservative that you use as they become available. Say, for example, there are some times where you use sodium sorbate, and some other times where you don't find the sodium sorbate, but potassium sorbate serves as well. Then you can declare, well, this is the functionality, is the whatever antifungal preservative, and then include both chemicals. Okay. And you do not, it doesn't mean that the product has both. It can have one or two, but you include both of them in the list of ingredients, and then you don't have to be changing your labels. Finally, colors. Okay, we talk about flavors, preservatives, now colors. The colors, there are two types of colors or colorants. What they call certified. Certified are synthetic colorants. Synthetic colorants require FDA analysis. So when the factories that make the colorants, they prepare a batch, a lot of the product of the colorant. They need to take a sample and send it to FDA for them to certify the colorant, and that's why it's called certified. Okay, there are about 8, 9, 10 different colorants that are certified. That they are in the regulation, they are listed in the regulation, and when you use these certified ingredients, you need to list them as such, as it is in here, and you've probably seen them. FD&C red number 4. Or you eliminate this portion and say it's red number 40. Okay, and that you have to specify those certified colorants as such. If it is not a certified colorant, there's a whole list of uncertified or unlisted colorants. And for those colorants, you can either use the name of the colorant or just state artificial color. Like, for example, one of the most common colorants is annatto. We use annatto like for coloring butter or margarine. So you can actually say, well, annatto, or say artificial color, whatever. Or if it is natural color, well, natural color. But the ones that are certified, you have to specify which is the certified color that you use. Okay, that's the declaration of ingredients. Those are all the required elements. However, when we talk about the ingredients, there is another thing on allergens, because allergens are these food products that actually impact the health of many people. They can either cause severe allergies, and when we talk about severe allergies, like the one for peanuts, that can cause the death in just a few minutes, anaphylaxis. Your throat gets closed and you cannot breathe, and then you die. So it's really severe. So we have either severe allergies or allergies that affect a great portion of the population. So in the United States and its territories, there are 8 declared allergens that they call the Big 8, which are fish, soy, egg, peanut, milk, wheat, shellfish, and tree nuts, including coconut, by the way. And these are the Big 8. So products that contain these ingredients or ingredients derived that are byproducts of these should declare that they contain allergens. And I have here an exception, like mollusks are not included in either fish or shellfish. So if you're processing